Before we talk about the gift of Christmas love, which, as you have obviously noticed, is the theme of this third week of Advent, I'm going to first explore the metaphysics of our traditional Advent song, as I promised last week. Specifically, the first verse, where you noticed I did change some of the words. I think it's important that we go into the metaphysics of things now and then. It's not something that is done quite as much in unity, but it is the foundation of unity. So I think it's well worth the journey. We've been singing this Advent hymn in our celebration slot for many years. And it comes from our unity hymnal. But for some reason last week, something felt off for me as we were singing it. Maybe it was a somber melody. Maybe it was especially those words of that first verse, ransoming captive Israel, that's mourning in lonely exile until the Son of God appears. Perhaps it was having just prepared a lesson that reflected on how we need to revisit and sometimes modify and sometimes release old traditions that no longer serve us, that sparked my awareness. At any rate, as I shared with you then, I felt called to revisit, modify, and possibly release this tradition that we've been following in our unity community. Now, it might have seemed simpler to just pick a new song. I do believe it's important to hear words that support our spiritual growth and fully embrace our evolving understanding of God and truth in all three of those expressions that we affirm each Sunday, particularly with our music, because as we know, music bypasses our brains and imprints itself straight on our hearts. So it becomes crucial sometimes that the words, we're sure we're getting the right meaning from the words that are imprinting. And as you have all witnessed over the years, this has been an especially important and ongoing process for me. Most of you here have shared Christmases with me remember me changing all the words to all the Christmas carols as I and we evolved from a historical understanding of the Christmas stories to now the more mystical perspective that we embrace, which also allowed me to go back to some of the more traditional words, because as they represented for me this mystical and mythical understanding, then it was possible to sing them with that same joy and deep feeling, and also tap into the heritage that they bring. I still find it pretty amazing that we all have been part of a generational shift in consciousness, both inside and outside of unity, of the Christmas story becoming understood as myth rather than history. When I started ministerial school, more years ago than I want to acknowledge, something like 23, 24 years ago, and prior to that, in all my preparation for ministerial school, Christmas was still being explored and looked at as a historical story. There was questions about, really, could there have been a virgin birth and all of those kinds of things, but it was basically seen as history. Over the last 50 plus years has been a just deluge of biblical study and understanding and new translations and understanding, so that we've really become to see that these Christmas stories were myths when they were written. They weren't written to tell a history, they were written to send a message. So that's a powerful journey that we've all participated in. But even as I believe the tradition should be revisited, I also recognize that especially in spiritual or religious traditions, especially again with rituals and music, that they serve to link us through the centuries and even the millennia to our Judeo-Christian heritage, which in its own way inspires and awakens and evokes the spirit of this season. Fortunately, here at Unity of Monterey Bay, we are well practiced in both and thinking, right? And we're blessed with Unity's gift of metaphysical meanings for traditional words. So I wanted to explore and share the heritage and metaphysics behind this song to see if we could infuse them with new meaning that would support and enhance our Advent experience. So let's begin with the heritage. I was actually pretty surprised to find that O Come Emmanuel actually has its origins in a Benedictine Gregorian chant from the late 8th and early 9th century. History tells us that beginning the week before Christmas, the monks would sing a verse a day to prepare their hearts and minds for Christmas. And there were originally 7 verses, and a number of traditions still use all 7 verses. And each verse described an aspect of the Christ that the church identified, as the Prince of Peace and as wisdom and all of those things. Again, we use the version out of our Unity hymnal, which has 3 verses that out of all of those 7, because I looked at them and many of them would not fit with our understanding of theology or Christmas, the Unity hymnal that was written or gathered in 1984 chose the 3 verses that we've been singing. As for the somber tone, while our modern emphasis around Advent and Christmas celebrates with feelings of expectation and joy the birth of a child, that is the revelation of God in the world, or as we understand it in Unity, the birth of Christ consciousness in the world and present within each one of us. Biblically, however, the anticipation of the Messiah was always in the context of oppression, injustice, and the longing for redemption from the domination systems of the world. Thus the more solemn music, which to be honest seems somehow appropriate in today's world. In short, there is a lot of tradition and heritage here. So too much to just discard the song and choose a new one that makes us feel good inside rather than perhaps makes us go deeper. So let's dive a bit into the metaphysics, beginning with the name Emmanuel, which is also central to our Advent Christmas meditation that I think many of us really enjoy. The O Come, O Come, the Emmanuel, Emmanuel, your name is called Emmanuel. This hymn, beginning with O Come, Emmanuel, refers to the Hebrew name that literally means God with us. Metaphysically, Emmanuel represents the consciousness that God is with us and we are one with God, and the understanding of how the Word, in essence the divine creative power and expression of God, became flesh in Jesus Christ and is now being made flesh in each one of us, even as it was in Him. It's like we sing in that meditation that God is with us and revealed in us. The next 3 lines are clearly the more challenging. I'll remind you, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appear. But let's see what metaphysics does with these. Israel, metaphysically, means one who is contending for, striving for, and ultimately prevailing for God. It was the name given to Jacob after he wrestled with an angel, which means he was overcoming his fears. He was struggling with his fears as he followed his quest to return home, make amends with his brother, and become the rightful patriarch of the 12 tribes that would ultimately form the Hebrew nation, and was named for him, and similarly dedicated to striving for God. Thus we have the name of the 12 tribes, or the nation of Israel. At the time of Jesus' birth, Israel was under the rule of Rome, having been under the rule of, in essence, captive to or in bondage to one empire after another for millennia, since the 8th century before the Common Era. Metaphysically, being captive or in bondage refers to having undue attachment to worldly thoughts and appearances, in essence, to be stuck in the sin of error consciousness. To ransom or deliver metaphysically means to awaken one or to awaken humanity from this sin of error consciousness into the freedom that comes from realizing our true spiritual nature and the spiritual principles underlying all of creation. In essence, we will know the truth, and the truth will set us free. Being in exile metaphysically represents being absent from the original unity of being. In essence, experience that illusion of separation from God and one another. And finally, Son of God metaphysically refers to being made in the image and likeness of God. In essence, having a divine spiritual nature, which is true of all of us. So when we put that all together, what we can hear is calling forth our awareness of God within us and as us, to awaken who we are, struggling, seeking, desiring God, but are currently stuck in a world of error consciousness and in the illusion of separation from one another and God, until we claim our own Christ identity and understand the truth that will set us free. Can you begin to hear that meaning in those words? And then we rejoice. Recall the ending is rejoice, rejoice, for this is coming. This awakening is promised, attainable, and ultimately inevitable for all who seek it. Hopefully that brings some clarity and inspiration to the song. I know it did for me. I spent hours with it. You're just hearing the words once. But as I'm sure you noted, I also did decide to change a few of the words. Specifically, I replaced the line referring to the Son of God with one that is more gender inclusive, until redeeming truth appears. And it's more representative of the Christ in all of us rather than particularly in Jesus. And 2, I changed that final chorus line from the future focused, shall come to thee, O Israel, to words that reflect a present moment affirmation of truth that awakes in us and ever dwells in us. It's my hope that when we sing this song now with this deepened metaphysical understanding and with some of these words tweaked, it will better evoke in us the meaning of Advent as we understand it, a season of hope and renewal and change, during which we mindfully midwife our own Christ consciousness into greater expression. And I welcome your feedback as you begin to sing it over, and we'll probably do it like one more week, and we'll do it next year, but I just see how these words deepen that experience for you, and share with me and Michelle about that. So I know that took a bit of time, but I believe in Advent that's what it's all about, that we should be seeking and searching and deepening our understanding of this sacred spiritual journey. The most important thing that I gained from this process was the reminder that the anticipation of the Messiah was always in the context of oppression, injustice, and the longing for redemption from the domination systems of the world, be they religious, governmental, or economic, which definitely offers a different perspective than our over-commercialized one huge birthday party where everyone gets a present, or even the tendency to vision our awakening Christhood as a transcendent experience that lifts us out of this world. Anybody ever experienced that? I have to admit that's part of my prior, and it's not to say that's a wrong experience, but I often have held Christmas, and that if I really embraced it spiritually, that I could be in that silence and experience that universal love and oneness that would lift me out of the struggles of this world.
Did you succeed?
Pardon?
Did you succeed?
A little bit, but not as much as I would like, yes. And I think the reason is because while neither of these suggest that we're bad people or that we're doing it wrong or that we should feel guilty, it does, I believe, suggest that we may still be stuck in a bit of captive Israel consciousness. But the good news is we're posed here once again this Advent with an invitation, ever present, to awaken into Emmanuel, which for me involves surrendering into the transforming power of the unconditional, inclusive, messy, wasteful love that is the life teachings, wisdom, mystery, and presence of Jesus and the Christmas spirit. After all, the Christmas story is not a story of a grand king born in a palace decreeing peace on earth. In fact, that was what the Roman emperors were doing. But rather, it's a story of Middle Eastern refugees birthing a child in the lowliest of states and being pursued by the authorities. Sound familiar? Which is why I so appreciate John Pavlovich's Advent devotional entitled Low, reminding us that the transforming Christmas spirit is found most abundantly in the low places in the world, where poverty, loneliness, dis-ease, heartache, and heartbreak are found. He speaks of Mary, the mother of Jesus, as the first responder for those of us who seek to emulate Jesus in the world. In essence, to live from that Christ consciousness. He reminds us that before she became the revered Madonna that we're all so familiar with in the carols and religious services, Mary was just a young girl, betrothed but unmarried, pregnant, surrounded by ordinary people who hadn't read her story with the detached hindsight that we all have. Imagine the fear and the pressure of her circumstances in a world where an unmarried pregnant woman would only meet with disdain. It had to at least be tremendously disoriented. Still, invited into something at once beautiful and terrifying, she simply said yes. Pavlovitz adds, you and I get to play a similar role in this moment in the story of the planet, a place burdened with sadness and disconnect. We are similarly pregnant with a capacity to bring peace and kindness and healing. He goes on to say that with the sheer scale of suffering today being easily overwhelming, it's tempting to look away and to offer our charity from the safety and comfort of an arm's distance, or try to experience this Christmas connection from the peacefulness of our meditation chair. But he reminds us to enter into the Christmas spirit, to fully enter into it, to embody the love that it holds. We must instead practice empathy and compassion relentlessly, keeping our hearts soft so as to not lose the ability to be powerfully moved by the pain and suffering all around us. And so that we can welcome this season by turning our gaze downward, by stopping to see people, by allowing ourselves to be inconvenienced by the pain in our path without looking away. So today, on this third Sunday of Advent, where we focus our attention on the divine idea and expression of love that was birthed again into the world some 2,000 years ago and has wound its way through the centuries, even through millennia, to this now moment, we're invited to think about what we're being called to birth into the world, how we might lower ourselves to be expressions of this compassion, forgiveness, courage, and honesty that could transform another's life. I invite you to affirm with me. May we let Christ's goodness and love form within us today and find ways to release it into the world. Namaste.
So now as you begin to prepare yourself for a few moments of quiet contemplation, getting comfortable in your seat, bringing your awareness to your body, allowing distractions of the outer to fade away as you bring all of your awareness and senses to bear on this now present moment. Just allowing all concerns that you may have, that endless to-do list, what you're going to be doing later, just set those things gently aside for just a few moments, knowing that they will be there for you to pick them up afterwards if you should choose. And just allowing ourselves these few moments of rest and peace, of coming away from the world for just a bit. taking some deep breaths in through your nose, filling up your chest and lungs, and letting it out slowly. And again, breathing in deeply. Imagine yourself just breathing in the peace and joy and love of this season. And exhaling all worry and stress and fear and concern. Continuing to just take slow, deep breaths, using the breath to anchor yourself in this present moment. Just feeling the perfection of this moment. Right here and right now, you have everything you need. Allow yourself to just marvel in the simple joy of just being. To be in awe of the perfection of this body. Without needing to do or be anything. And I invite you now to just open yourself up to the mystery of this time of year. The mystery of the Christmas story. This ancient story that we hear told in so many different ways. And just for a time, allow your intellect to take a rest. We don't have to figure it out. We can just open ourselves up to the magic and the mystery, knowing that something important is happening, not only out in the world, but within us. And as we look around and we see pain and suffering in the world, we realize that it's even more important that we take time to make room in the inn of our hearts, to prepare that manger for the birth of the Christ consciousness in each of us. To be like Mary, willing to step into the unknown, without even having all the information, to be willing to say yes to the call of Spirit. Whatever that call is. Being ready to surrender our own will, our own ego, our own intellect, and allow that higher consciousness to guide us. Knowing that as we prepare and strengthen that place within us, it is from there that we can shine that light out into the world. That we can be the light in the world. That we can be that Emmanuel, God with us. God being reborn over and over again in us, as us, and through us. And so now I invite you to just spend a few moments in quiet contemplation in the silence. meditation to a close, just gently bringing your awareness back to this time and space. And we do so with our hearts filled with gratitude for the peace, love, joy, hope, and faith of this season, for this community that supports us in our spiritual growth, for the loving presence of God that is always here. And so we say, thank you, God. And so it is.